Los Angeles, Southern California, a city that's home to nearly 4 million Americans and people from around the world. A place ranked as the top third most visited places in the US. With iconic attractions, luxurious amenities, and late-night fun, Los Angeles has it all. However, it also has and currently stands as the most largest city to home nearly 70,000 homeless people, according to US News. I interviewed several students at the University of Southern California to hear their perspectives on the topic of homelessness and question whether we as a society can combat this ongoing issue and what we can do to help. Do you experience any type of neglect or bias feeling towards them?
That's a hard question. I don't think I feel a specific way about homeless people. I think I feel a way about their situation. Oftentimes it's unfair and because of the system or due to drugs or mental illness. I don't think I have a bias towards them. I just think I have sympathy for how they ended up generally.
I grew up being more cautious about them, just trained by my family to be more cautious around homeless people. But right now I'm trying to break through that and just really see them as other human beings and talk to them more and hear their stories and help out if I can. Yeah.
I would say that I don't have any negative bias towards them because I do sympathize with them in the fact that the situation that they're currently in, the fact that they're homeless, they can't control that most of the time because it's due to outside factors maybe their family didn't fund them or things like that. I would say that I feel that my parents raised me in a certain way to not always give them money every time I see them or I pass by them. So in a way it's kind of ingrained in me and I understand that and I acknowledge that, but it's also still there and I'm trying to work on that. So
I think that's a good question. I think to start off, I'm not from this area, I'm not from the US at all. So I think homelessness kind of differs wherever you go, wherever you live. So having grown up in mainly developing countries across the world, homelessness is a big problem, and you see people who are homeless, especially within Nepal and within the area I lived in. It wasn't very high income. I've seen homelessness, I've experienced it around my society, and I don't think there is much neglect or any sort of bias against them in any sense. Just the way I was raised was if you can help anyone, you should, in a religious way too, but also just passing it on. It's just a moral value that I was taught and brought up with. And I kind of just believe everyone is the same. Just because I've had the opportunity or the privilege to grow up in, a household where I do have, dinner at the table and I do have shelter and a roof to sleep under, doesn't make me, in a sense, any better than anyone else. Just because I have more opportunity doesn't mean I'm better in any sort of way than someone who may have not had those opportunities in life, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
I feel like homeless people are still human beings at the end of the day, and so deserve to be treated with respect as human beings, but I'd be lying if I said that in my day-to-day life I always treated homeless people like I would treat any other person that I meet, although I think that is the right thing to do. I feel like sometimes, even though we know the right thing to do, we aren't always able to take those actionable steps. I think if I were to treat a homeless person like a person that I saw in my day-to-day life, I wouldn't hesitate to reach out and help them, ask them their name, see if there's anything I can do to help them out in this moment. But I don't always do that, truthfully, although I feel like I should.
Do you think there's a solution to people who are homeless? And will we ever get to that point?
I think with certain funding and certain resources, we could find a solution. It'll take a lot of work to get there. We need to get resources for children, for the mentally ill, for those who are addicted to drugs, for those who are in recovery. You also have to think about what's going to happen once they have been helped. What does really being helped mean? Do they get continued support, or once they're done, are they done? How would that work?
Well, I believe that the issue of homelessness will always be a thing in general in society, but there's definitely ways that we can alleviate, I guess, the entire situation of homelessness. We can donate to shelters. Shelters will provide goods and services to them, and we can also create meals for them. and things like that, yeah.
I think that's a difficult question because I think homelessness is such a multifaceted issue that there's not going to be one catch-all solution. It's going to be a combination of different efforts. But I think where it will start would be more government intervention because while it's going to be difficult to come up with policy that people agree on in combating homelessness, I think the most important thing is to put funding towards tackling solutions because one of the big issues that it always seems is, where the money has to come from somewhere, but clearly there is money to spare when you look at a lot of government projects that are funded that seem explicitly anti-homeless. So adding spikes under highway impasses or having benches that have bumps to not encourage, which shows that there's definitely money to build the infrastructures. There's definitely things that the government can do to solve it. But obviously that won't be enough alone. But I think we need to start somewhere.
I think there is a solution to homelessness because I know that there's so much unutilized land in the United States that we could turn into subsidized housing for homeless people. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get to a place where homelessness is completely eradicated because of greed. Point blank, period. Everyone wants to make more for themselves and acquire more wealth and store that and not necessarily give it out to other people in a way that would allow us to make the changes necessary for homelessness to be eradicated.
It is very hard. I know that a lot of governments have tried to solve this problem, but here in LA, still see a lot of homeless people. Maybe a solution could be the government investing more in homeless houses or supporting these people to find jobs. I think that could be a solution.
It causes people to be homeless.
A lot of it is economic factors, maybe just the rent prices increasing, being able to pay rent and then having to maybe move into a vehicle or move around to other people's homes, that not working out, finally moving on to the streets. At least the first year of homelessness, most of the reasons for it are economic factors and not behavioral issues or anything. But then after the 1 year, a lot of behavioral issues do develop just because of the struggles of living homeless.
I think there's a lot of different causes. Again, from where I grew up, I think overpopulation was the biggest cause because there's so many people, not enough jobs or employment. Especially where I come from, because there's so many people, there's only so many jobs you can do and there's only so many places you can live. That is urbanized, it's near where you need to work. I think that's kind of what causes that homelessness because people don't have areas to live and people don't have jobs to do, so they don't have the income to afford housing in a sense.
It really depends on the individual because not everyone will encounter that for the same reason. I think one part is just the nature of homelessness makes it really difficult to get out of it. So it's a very perpetual thing because when you're homeless, the way to get out is to make money. But in order to apply for most jobs, you need a place of residence. And without that, it creates a cycle where it's difficult to get a job. So any sort of issue, so losing a job, being born into a more poor environment, they can all contribute. And every person has a different reason for becoming homeless. But the issue is that once you're homeless, it's much more difficult to escape that cycle.
I think it's a lot of things, right? Unforeseen circumstances in someone's life. The typical thing is if you were making a certain amount of money in the US, then there's a breakdown that says you should be making this much and saving this much. But the reality is that cost of living in most major cities in the United States is so high that people are just able to barely make it by with their salaries and don't have enough to save as a nest egg for themselves. So when they do unforeseen circumstance, their car breaks down, it's a downward spiral from there because they don't have the resources to support themselves. Community that would be able to support a person that was going through a tough time. I, for example, fell on tough times. I'd have my mom or my sister or my family to lean on. When people lack community and personal resources, it's a perfect disaster.
Do you feel homelessness is an urban challenge?
I feel I feel it's definitely more accentuated when it comes to the cities, because often there's a lot of gentrification in cities that pushes communities living in poverty out, so they really don't have anywhere to live anymore. There is homelessness everywhere, but I definitely think it's more prevalent in big cities.
It's intriguing because I don't live here, and this is like what I would call an urban area. It's funny because what we call urban, where I grow up, would be like a non-urban or more rural area over here. Within that, the definition of urban and rural kind of comes into play, but what homelessness is kind of about, like in rural areas, housing is much cheaper. It's more easier to afford. I think homelessness is, a majority of the time, it's an urban problem. Sure, you can have homelessness in rural areas too. I think for a majority, because of what homelessness typically is, and through its nature, it's an urban problem.
I don't think it's necessarily that it's unique to urban areas, but I think just by the nature of an urban area being a more concentrated population of individuals, homelessness is bound to present itself as more a pressing issue just because of how it's set up. And also the way that the urban environment is made, it makes it more as well as easy to house an individual who's homeless in that you have more covered areas and it's much easier to support yourself, I suppose. I don't know if that's a very convoluted answer, but more so than more rural areas where it's a lot more open field.
I believe it's more on the urban areas because in rural areas, there's more of a knit-tight community, so people help each other. Instead, like in urban areas, people don't get the support and community vibe that they have in rural areas, so they're like one of many others, so they don't get like that personalized support. And I think also like drug addiction and also temptations are more common in urban areas.
What are some things you as a student can do differently to help people who are homeless? Do you think people would agree with your decisions?
One thing, like even as students, even if we don't have a lot, there's always things we can give that we like are blessed with more of. Even if we aren't able to give much, like just giving them resources, like maybe directing them to websites or like organizations out there, because there are like a lot of organizations that either provide free like laundry, like housing, or like food. There's just like a lot of organizations out there, so providing them those resources. I think also just talking to them, just like seeing them as people, like helping them feel like not like rejected as part of society, but just like just like having a conversation with them as you would with like someone else.
I think, like volunteering, especially like within this day and age, like I think we throw out a lot of stuff that can be used instead of donating it, like donating old clothes, for example, or stuff that's still usable but we don't use for some reason. Donating to just charities that fight this problem. Kind of going into homeless areas and kind of just talking to people, trying to see if you can, help them out. Because I think just changing one life kind of makes a difference. It's like there's only so much one person can do, but if we all help out one person, we can really make a difference in our societies and like the places we live in. So, yeah.
I've seen other schools do this program where you can take your undonated meal swipes at the end of a semester. And basically, I don't know how the system works, but cash it in for real food and then donate it to the local homeless population. It would be cool if USC could do something like that. And do I think people would agree with my decisions? I think that other students here would. Yeah.
I think we as students, maybe we could participate in outreach, like going around our USC campus area, talk to people who seem homeless, giving them like supplies, food, or things they might need. Also, like winter is coming very soon, so we might give them like a blanket or anything for them to live comfortable life. I think people might be against that because getting into like contact with homeless people can also be very dangerous sometimes. So I think that is a very arguable topic.